Is there any proof of the divine or all the other different claims that various religions and belief systems say? Well, you get that question an awful lot from people, particularly atheists or agnostics. And I think what they really mean isn't, do you have any proof? Because obviously there isn't any proof. There isn't any proof per se of quite a few things. What they probably mean is there any evidence? Well, in that case, it would all depend on what exactly you consider to be evidence. And is it evidence for you? I mean, there's quite a few things that are evidence, in my opinion, or evidence to me. You see, a lot of people these days who are critical of religions in general or particular religions have a tendency to look at them as something created by man, just randomly created. Like someone, perhaps like L. Ron Hubbard, just got up one day and said, you know, I'm going to make a religion. I mean, why not? It's Saturday. I've got nothing else to do. But in reality, most religions are the result of some kind of mystical experience. Someone, for whatever reason and in whatever way, whether they had a long talk with a burning bush, which I think was probably a little more interesting and complicated than simply a talk with a shrubbery that happened to be on fire, or if you were taken to heaven like Muhammad on a strange sort of vehicle which when explained almost sounds kind of like a UFO, or a fiery chariot like Elijah. Or Buddha, Siddhartha, sitting underneath the tree, meditating and simply coming to realize all of these truths. These are evidence, no matter how you look at it. It's evidence. It's evidence you may decide isn't true, but it is evidence. It's just like if you had a court case and a witness came in and said, I saw this and that happen. Would that be evidence? Yes, it would be evidence. You might not believe that witness, or you might believe that witness. Why do people believe what Jesus Christ says? I think a lot of Christians will tend to give the very simplistic statement that, well, he died for my sins. I don't think that's really true of most Christians, at least not deep down. I think what happened first is people, for whatever reason, had a reason to believe Jesus Christ. They agreed with what he said. They related to what he said. They related to the story of Jesus Christ. And then when Jesus Christ says, well, I talked to God. I spoke to my Father. I had these realizations. I had these mystical experiences. I spent 40 days in the desert and was administered by angels and fought with the devil and etc., etc. They believe that. And to me, when anyone has a mystical experience like that and brings back information, that is a type of evidence. I may believe it, I may not believe it. Frankly, I'm the kind of person that will probably give anyone at least a fair chance. I may not believe what they say, but I'll give them a chance, even if it's an alien came down and talked to me yesterday and told me that the whole world should such and such and such and such and such and such. Now, I've been listening to some really interesting podcasts and great YouTube videos, largely about consciousness. There's a doctor at the University of Virginia that has a lot of really interesting things to say about it, because philosophers, since probably the beginning of time, have been arguing over whether or not the mind or consciousness is actually in you. Is it really in your brain? Does your brain produce consciousness, or does that consciousness actually reside somewhere else and simply work through the brain? And some of these scientists that study this sort of thing are coming to really intriguing conclusions, highly varied conclusions, but very interesting conclusions. And it does seem entirely possible that consciousness actually does exist somewhere else. And if it does seem to promote the possibility, for instance, of Buddhism, where there's the belief that we do reincarnate. And of course, they study all kinds of cases where children, usually very young children, will remember their past lives. It usually only lasts a few years, but in various areas of the world, it does seem to be that in areas of the world where they believe in reincarnation, it seems more likely for the children to remember their past lives. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But is it a kind of evidence? Yes, it is a kind of evidence. You'll also have children who dream of heaven. People that have near-death experiences who may experience heaven. We have certainly had cases where it's been lied about. We had a case recently where a child had said that he had visited heaven, and he now admits that it was complete baloney. But that's what it really comes down to. You know, do you believe this person? This is a personal experience, and virtually all religions are based on people having personal experiences. In religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, you have people who will meditate, and they will come to these realizations of us all being one, where they will actually see it and feel it and experience that state. And they will experience previous lives, and they'll come back and they'll tell people. That's evidence. I think there's a great rift between the East and the West, which I'll talk more about in another video, where Christians have a tendency to say, well, yes, but if you want to find truth, you have to find truth out there, because God, or the divine, whatever, is out there. And the Judeo-Christian Islamic side of things, whereas as more the Hindus and Taoists and Buddhists will be trying to find the truth within. Now, to me, that's nothing but labeling. As above, so below. Finding truth inside yourself and outside is the exact same thing. It's just like quantum physics versus astrophysics. People will say, well, quantum physics is what controls things on the atomic level. Astrophysics studies things mechanically. But we also know fundamentally, or scientists know fundamentally, that there's no difference. There can't be a difference. Why? Because the macroscopic world is made up of the microscopic world. So you and I and the planets and suns and everything in between are made up of these particles that do and don't exist, and might or might not exist, or exist along various probability waves, and may or may not exist until the probability wave collapses, and all these different things. The outside and the inside is the same. And you can look at it either way. And the East and the West really isn't different, in my opinion. They just label things differently. In fact, you could just as easily say that when you are having an experience of God, you are having an internal experience. Or you could just easily say when you're having an internal experience, you're actually having an external experience. You were experiencing God out there. It's the same thing. There's no difference. You're just making the same statement. And even in your Christian, Islamic, Judeo religions, you do have your Sufists in Islam, your Kabbalists in Judaism, and there are several groups of Christian mystics which will all wind up saying the exact same thing the East does. All of these people having types of evidence. Again, whether or not you believe that evidence, or, like in my case, I may take someone's evidence, or I may take someone's experience. I may say, I believe that you had that experience. I am glad that it affected you the way it affected you. I don't necessarily take that as my own personal truth. Why? Because I may not necessarily believe in your interpretation of it. After all, I think that when we have mystical experiences, we are, no matter what, having to translate them. Even just by experiencing those experiences, they are being translated to us. And I may not necessarily agree with your translation. I'm not saying your translation is wrong. It's certainly not wrong for you. And I'm not calling anyone a liar. But I may not necessarily take that as personal truth. And to me, that's a very central tenet to Omnism. We don't have to take everything that everyone says as being true for us. We can simply recognize that it's true for them. Is that proof? No. Is it evidence? It's evidence. Whether or not you take that evidence as truth, that's up to you. And that's up to everyone. And so when an agnostic or an atheist asks you, is there any evidence for what you believe? You say, well, there's evidence for me. But is that evidence for you? I don't know. I'm the urban omnist, still rifling through reams and reams and reams of evidence. I'll see you guys on the next one. And remember guys, none of this works without you. So subscribe to our channel, like us on Facebook and Twitter, and above all, don't forget to send me those questions.